the struggle that Westerners undergo as they're trying to absorb the teaching and to be taught is that it's so very different from what we are accustomed to as Americans. Even our concept of religion, our ideas to how religion should be practiced, and most especially our idea of the goal. This is unbelievably different from what we are used to. And as Westerners also, we have been given a smorgasbord of philosophical ideas to pick and choose from, and are known for our ability to synthesize them into something that suits us very well, which in some ways works. In some areas of one's life, that kind of thing works. But when it comes to actually practicing the Buddha's teaching purely, it may not work so well. One should actually apply oneself and really learn the philosophy and learn it very purely. So that can be a struggle for us as Westerners. We actually prize our intellectual prowess, our ability to dance through concepts and knit them together in some purposeful way, and to pick and choose and to create actually our own concepts. But as I say, in the Buddha's teaching, that may be something less than effective, as it really compromises the purity of the technology, which is a very specific and very workable technology if followed correctly. Again, as Westerners, we understand things in very, very superficial ways. We understand that if you pay money, you get something, and if you don't pay, you get a letter, and and we have ways of understanding how to accomplish our goals. But there are very superficial levels of cause and effect that we understand. We can't understand the deeper levels of cause and effect. For instance, if we see some disruption within our lives, we can't really understand how it came about. We can only understand a very superficial way of rectifying it. This is an extract, and this is basically a serial box top version of a serial box top teaching that was given by a Rinpoche that was recently here, Baka Rinpoche. And he was actually reading directly from a text and trying to condense it and give us the bit of information right there as he spoke and as he taught. And I have notes on that. He was talking about cause and effect relationships. He talked about causes and how causes actually create a main result, a similar result, and a reaction result, and also a place or condition result. And it seems that, and again, this is less than serial box top version, that when you look at cause and effect relationships, you can actually look at the cause and you can see a direct effect. For instance, let's say in one life you kill someone. This is a terrible example, but in one life you kill someone, and perhaps in some future life you yourself are killed, or you yourself die young, or something like that, and that would be the direct effect. There would be a similar result, which means that while the direct result would happen, there would be also certain similarities within the context of that life that go along with that. For instance, as I understand it, if you had killed someone in a past life and that karma were ripening now, it is unlikely that it would ripen in such a way that you're perhaps a Sunday school teacher and an ordinary housewife and you're just a good person, and you've never done anything in your life wrong, and then all of a sudden you just get up and kill somebody. That isn't so likely to happen. It could possibly happen, but it isn't so likely. It isn't normal within the context of our lives. So there are similar kinds of things that ripen and similar kinds of events that happen with the karmic cause and effect relationship that create the entire scenario. And for instance, let's say in a past life you were very dull and very ignorant and you didn't apply yourself to anything in particular. That might actually ripen, according to the Buddha, by being reborn in an animal realm. That one's mind could actually take on that dullness that animals have, in that they have a general inability to be able to practice any kind of mental discipline whatsoever. They are completely reactive consciousness. Now, the third kind of effect would be a reaction effect. And a reaction effect would be what has to do with developing an habitual tendency. Take, for instance, the example of the killing. Again, it is unlikely that cause would ripen, that effect would ripen under the condition that the person were very clean-cut and, like I say, a Sunday school teacher and never did anything wrong and drinks decaf and all of that kind of stuff. It is very unlikely that that kind of person living the wonderful and pure life that they do would suddenly rise up and just knock somebody off. What they would develop along with that is a kind of a series or sequence or conglomeration of habitual tendencies. That those habitual tendencies would reflect that karma. That there would be a tendency to think in a certain way, in a destructive way, or there would be a tendency to live one's life in such a way that one was very reactive. That kind of thing. There would be a whole scenario of things that go with it. So it's almost like the shadow of the original cause and effect relationship of karma. The fourth cause and effect event is that of place. The fourth effect is that of place and result. It's actually I think you wouldn't say it's a place and result. You would say it is the result of place. That is the result that would occur, the effect that would occur. And that indicates the condition that you would experience. For instance, let's say in the past you stole something from someone else, and in this lifetime something would be stolen from you, and that would be the ripening, the direct ripening, the main result of that cause. At the same time, if you had more than one, or if you had some bulk of karma associated with stealing, in this lifetime you might also be born very poor. In fact, poverty is considered to be directly the result of stealing in past lives or taking from others. So that would be the effect of place and habitual tendency. You might be born in a very poor area under very poor conditions where it is impossible to really liberate yourself from that poverty. I think, for instance, of places that I've seen in India where one cannot get out of the poverty. There simply is no economic way to get out of the poverty. And their belief actually goes along with that. They pray to be reborn in a better place because they know there really isn't any way to get out of that poverty. So their only relief from that would be to do lots of pujas and practices and prayers, hopefully in order to get away from that poverty through death, to exit that through death, and then to be reborn in a higher caste or in a higher level of life. And that's the way the thinking is. Now, a Buddhist would say that one should actually aggressively get in and purify one's karma associated with stealing or taking from others through extraordinary acts of kindness. Hindus don't necessarily think that way. They think that they will practice and then they will die and they will be reborn in a better condition. But Buddhists would think that one should begin to purify that right now through generosity. And of course, if you didn't have anything, it would be hard to be generous, but you could be generous with your time. You could be generous with whatever little you do have. And that would be the way to do that. At any rate, I wasn't going to get into that extensively with the children, but what I was going to point out is some of the different cause and effect relationships. And this is quite interesting. This actually comes directly from text. And that if you have done a lot of killing in past lives, you will have short life and illness, chronic illness. Those people that have chronic illness and can't seem to fix it, can't seem to rehabilitate themselves from it, generally have some karma of killing in their past. And so what one might do as an antidote to that, and one should always think in terms of applying the direct antidote, what one might do in answer to that is to be very much involved in saving the lives of others somehow. And you think, well, here in America there isn't much opportunity for that unless armed with a pistol and a shield you stand out in the middle of Manhattan and try to prevent shooting or something like that, or perhaps even downtown D.C. That's not quite true. Actually, around here, we have many times done some long life practice. In fact, when I was sick last year and had a series of sicknesses, my students were kind enough to do that very thing for me, and I believe it to have been very helpful. They would go to Poole's General Store right down there, and they would buy worms that are destined to be fish food, you know, that are meant to be bait, night crawlers and things like that. And so they would liberate them from Poolesville. It must have been very odd for them, for 25 red people to go down there and say, "I want your worms." It must have been extremely weird. But anyway, they would liberate the worms, and then they would come and put them in the gardens very carefully. It isn't enough to liberate them. If you liberate them and throw them on the road, they die anyway, and that doesn't help much. You actually have to make sure that they survive. So they would liberate them, and they would plant them in the gardens. And we have more night crawlers on this particular turf than probably anywhere else in the world. So lots of night crawlers have been liberated. And let's see, minnows. They would liberate minnows and bring them to the canal. And what else did they liberate? What? Crabs. How did we do crabs? Oh, right. We bought them from the fish market, right. Threw them back in the water. Can you imagine what a shock that was to them? You buy a ton of crabs and just, oh. Anyway. Completely out of context in our world. So that is the kind of practice that you can do. You can also pray for the long life of others. You can be as caring for their lives and well-being as you can for your own. We do many long life prayers. We pray for the long lives of our teachers, for instance. We pray for the long lives of all practitioners that wish to continue practicing. And we consider, one enters into the inner posture of actually considering their life and their long life and their stability of life and their health to be as important as one's own, rather than clinging to one's own health. And that really purifies the karma of that kind of thing. So it is a really helpful and necessary practice, and I have seen it with my own eyes bring excellent results. So stealing in the past brings about the result of poverty, of hunger, and of more craving. One would think, here in America we tend to think, well, if I could just have a little more, then I'd be fine. If I could just, I have a red dress now, if I just had a blue dress, then I'd be fine. And if I could just get the whole wardrobe put together with the hose, then I'd be fine. And then maybe some more makeup. And pretty soon you've got this whole thing laid out, and then after a while you can get to the point, unless you're really too far gone to get to the point, where you are somewhat saturated. Yet that desire hasn't really been satisfied unless at some time one has actually practiced and purified that desire from the mind stream, from within the mind stream. Actually, what happens is that one tries to get things, to take things, through the act of actually taking, especially when it is not just craving, but actually stealing from others, one's craving is increased. That the craving then becomes not a cause, but then it becomes a result also, and it perpetuates itself like a snake eating its tail. And at some point one has to cut through it. One has to first of all purify the karma of stealing, and one also has to really get in there and purify the karma of craving. So to purify the karma of stealing, perhaps you might imagine that one could actually take from one's own belongings and really give to others in a very generous way. One could go out of one's way to make sure that others around you had at least as much as you had. And that is a very powerful practice to do through generosity. Also, one could learn to be content. That's possible. Here in America, we are not at all convinced that that's possible. But one can learn to be content with what one has, and in fact, learning that, one can learn to be content with a whole lot less as well. One can actually learn the wonderful lesson that contentment really doesn't come from any of that. It comes from stability of mind, really, and often comes, and I think comes more from generosity than it does from craving. Certainly that's what the Buddha teaches. Now, if you had, let's see, sexual misconduct in the past life, how many of you might have had that? It's very common, you know. Sexual misconduct in past lives produces ugliness. Well, everybody in here is good looking, so you can't have been too bad. Produces ugliness, but now I see, and now ever since I've learned that, I'm going. And it also produces quarreling with your mate. Whoa! How many of you have ever had that problem? So, it may not show on the outside, but you go home and fight a lot. And it seems to me that one could antidote that by being faithful, by being pure in one's actions, by considering one's actions very carefully, by being true in one's heart, by not being deceptive, that kind of thing. Conversely, by avoiding sexual misconduct, one generally is born into a wonderful family, and then when one has one's own family, it is very warm and wonderful and harmonious. With the divorce rate going up as it is, makes you think that perhaps what's really happening is that a lot of people that had a lot of fun in the past are all being born at the same time. It could happen. And if in the past you have been engaged in lying, then the effect of that, when it ripens, is that bad things are said about you, and you are blamed by others, and even jailed without guilt. Haven't you ever heard of stories where we've seen movies about themes like that, where people who have been framed, you know, and were jailed without really being guilty, or they've been blamed for something that they really didn't do. And our first thought is, gee, what an unjust world. How can that happen? How can that really occur? You know, it just breaks our hearts that the potential for that is even there. And according to this teaching, actually what you're seeing is you're seeing the tip of the iceberg, because the whole cycle of event may actually have begun quite a long time ago, or it may be an event that seed of which was planted some long time ago, time out of mind, where we can't even remember. Of course we can't remember past lives, but where we can't even think of that kind of time. And under those conditions, what we see now is just the ripening, the direct result of something like that. But it is an entire cycle of event, and we can't recognize that because we can only recognize what is contained within a very short number of years. We can only understand what has happened since the time of our birth. If you've committed if you've committed slander in the past, and I won't spend too much time on this, if you've committed slander in the past, you'll have difficulty with family members. I think about all of us who have had teenage sons and daughters that have given us a fit at one time or another. You have the feeling that everyone is against you. It ripens actually within the mind stream as the feeling that everyone is against you. And it doesn't have to, I don't think, go to the level of paranoid schizophrenic. There are times when each one of us has felt as though our friends had turned against us, or they were in cahoots against us, or something like that. And that is the result of slander in a past life. And also, if you are a boss, your employees are not obedient. Harsh words. If you have had said harsh words in the past, you will hear uninteresting things. Bad news. Sounds like conversation around my dinner table. And your words, no matter what you do, will seem to cause quarrels or bad feelings with others. Have you ever met a person like that? No matter what they say, even if they say good morning, it somehow becomes a problem. They just seem to stir up trouble. Even if they say, you look very nice today, somehow it affects you strangely. Has that ever happened to you? Well, someone will say, you look very nice today, and the way it hits you is, you mean I don't always look nice? Or, well, in fact, I have a friend of mine who used to say to me all the time before I asked her please to stop, she always just said to me, you look so comfortable. Now, when I heard that, I clearly thought she was saying to me, you look comfortable because you're not dressed up enough to be uncomfortable. You know, or you just are not tied up straight or something like that. It's really that kind of thing, that kind of effect on people is caused by your having harsh words in the past. And you know, some people have that so much more that they just seem to be like rubbing velvet the wrong way, you know. They just have that effect on the world. It's from harsh words. Now, generally, these people take, if you think about it, and I'm just trying to describe how things go, these people will take satisfaction through reverting back to their old habitual tendencies. They will generally engage in harsh words again, thinking that if they just fight people off or set the record straight, you know how Americans are famous for wanting to set the record straight one way or another. Let's get it all out. Then what happens is more harsh words are said, and through these harsh words, the karma is even intensified. It continues. So the problem isn't solved at all. It may seem like for 30 seconds something is all right, but it continues to ripen in a more deep and profound way. Gossip. If you have gossiped in the past, you have in this life no courage to talk. Have you yourself experienced this, or have you met someone who has experienced where you just can't say what you need, or you can't say how you feel, or you can't get up in front of people and speak in any way? You just have no courage for that, no strength to do that? According to the Buddhist teaching, that is from gossiping in the past. And here we are, we try to exercise that by kicking ourselves in the behind and getting ourselves up and making ourselves doing it, and it still doesn't come out right. And what we don't do, what we never consider to do, is to actually purify the karma, which can be done. It's doable. The technology to do it is available. And also, even if you say the truth, others will not believe you. Kind of like the boy that cried wolf. If you have engaged in coveting or wanting in the past, wanting something that belongs to others, your wishes in this life, in the life when the karma for that ripens, will not be fulfilled. In other words, you will want things to come through and they'll just be out of your grasp, just seemingly that far away, and you do all the right things and you still can't make it come true. And we've all experienced that, so we all have that within our mind streams. Cruelty in the past. You're always in danger. When that ripens, you experience danger, and no matter what, you cannot be free of danger. Wrong view, which is to practice or to teach a religious philosophy that moves away from enlightenment rather than toward enlightenment. You will be born into a religion that does not have the capacity to teach enlightenment, a religion that has no basis, and you will have here the exact translation is wicked mind. We can think of, you know, a heavily negative mind like that. So these are just a few of the different things that that one can experience. And when we experience them, we really look around for a solution. We look here, and we look there, and we look out there, and we look over there, and we look over there, and we look everywhere. But where we don't look is within our own mind streams. And we try to make things, we try to blame everything. We are engaged in the process of blame continually. It happened because my mother dropped me on my head when I was 10 years old, or because nobody ever loved me, or because they loved me too much, or because I don't have a friend, or because I don't have enough money, or these kinds of things. We blame like that. And when we look for solutions, we look for them also out there. We always think if we could just get it straight with other people, then the problem somehow would be solved. We never, however, examine our own mind streams and the cause and effect relationships that exist in seed form within our own mind streams. And we never apply a technology that will actually alleviate that condition within our mind streams. But here are some, actually these are I was giving you the ideas that I had about what the antidote for these problems would be. These are the teachings from the text. Killing, the antidote is to save lives. Stealing, the antidote is charity. Misconduct, the antidote is pure vow, whether it be vow of friendship, marriage vow, or renunciate vow. Lying, truth-telling. Harsh words, the karma of harsh words is purified by praise. How many times do we get caught up in that thing about condemning people, thinking that we're going to find relief through the processes of condemnation, of making people feel worse than us, or making ourselves seem better that way, when the true antidote is actually praising? We never think of that. Slander, the antidote to slander is to mediate, to actually mediate between people so that they can come to a harmonious basis or harmonious relationship. A peacemaker, a person who has that, would be purifying the karma of slander. The karma of gossip can be purified by recitation of mantra. Now, in other words, in our tradition, we consider that we are purifying the speech. Speech which has been used to harm others can be used in a very pure way. So recitation of prayer and mantra. To covet, the purification of that is generosity, faultless generosity, where it is as important to give as it is to have something for yourself. The karma of cruelty is purified through helping others. The karma of wrong view is purified through praising the teaching that leads to enlightenment and having faith, and through maintaining proper view. And the advice is that if you see these scenarios in your life, and if you know that they exist, and you can clearly know what has happened in the past by looking at what is happening today. That's one of the Buddha's basic philosophies. Basically, and of course I'm paraphrasing it in my traditional Western way, but the Buddha said, don't believe me, look at your life. You can see what happened in the past by looking at your life. Don't take my word for it. If you find that you are in that kind of condition and that you are suffering from these things, then according to the teaching, vows of some kind should be taken from the teacher or in front of a shrine, but preferably from a teacher. One can take vows, for instance, for one day, vows of renunciation for one day. Any student at any time can come up to the teacher and say, I wish to take vows of renunciation for one day, and they would live and act accordingly for one day. Or for 2 days, or for 3 days, or for a week. Or one can take, there's a certain practice that we have learned recently. It can be a 2 or 3 day practice, but it should be at least 2 days where one, after eating a noon meal, if it is done that way, engages in silence and fasting for the rest of the day, and the only sound that comes out of one's mouth is mantra recitation. One only does practice in mantra recitation. Sometimes it is done where there is no food taken for 2 days, just water, liquid earlier in the day, and that one actually only does praising and meditation and mantra recitation for that time. No, when it's a very strong renunciation, and it's like the idea is that one could live a life of renunciation, but some people really can't. They don't have the kind of circumstance to do that in, and so what they would do instead is to condense that and take short retreats that are renunciate retreats. Also more powerful to take vows on certain days. For instance, in the New Year, this is the first month of our Tibetan New Year. On this first month, during any day on this first month, it is very, very valuable to take some kind of vow. Even if one were to take, a very lenient vow, such as, I vow for the next 15 days to say no slander toward anyone else, or I vow for the next 15 days to be extraordinarily generous, to make many offerings. That kind of thing is very valuable, and if done on the first month or the fourth month of the Tibetan year, these vows are 100,000 times stronger. So their potency is increased by 100,000 times. So now everybody's going to make a queue right over here, and they're going to say, give me some vows right now. Actually, during the 4th month, and there were certain days during the year that coincide with the Buddha's extraordinary attainments, where the vows are 1,000,000 times stronger. 1,000,000 times stronger that way. The potency, their ability to purify the mind, due to the blessing of the enlightened realization and the miraculous compassion of the Buddha, one is able to make great headway at that time. So the technology is there, and one can practice accordingly. One has only to really develop the ability, the competency in being able to look at oneself objectively and truthfully and honestly, and most of all, courageously. That's the difficult part. It is really for us, for some reason, so much easier to look at the different circumstances in our lives that we become involved in and that we are habitually pushed into, and the ones that really stress us out, the ones that really get to us. It is so much easier for us somehow to say, well, that's just the way it is. Or, I'm sure there's something to learn here. Or, it's not my fault, it's their fault, and I can't get away from them. You know, that kind of thing. It just seems to be so much easier for us. We take great comfort in that kind of thing, where in fact we should take no comfort in that at all. Because according to the teaching, and again this is coming from the enlightened perspective of a Buddha, that kind of attitude, that kind of going outside of oneself and leaving things be and simply continuing these deep habitual tendencies does nothing but increase the suffering. It does nothing but increase the karma. So that if one engages in some sort of slanderous activity, let's say, and one comes back and no one cares about the person, and then they continue to blame them for it and slander them in the process, the cycle goes on and it just never ends. It doesn't end really until we stop it. So at whatever level we practice, whether we are dyed-in-the-wool Buddhist or whether we are simply people that want to make a better world, simply people that want to live a spiritual life, simply people that want to make some progress, this technology can and should be applied. And it takes courage. It is very difficult for us to look at ourselves in that way and be responsible. To learn the technique of responsibility is one of the first things that the Buddha teaches. And it is a human teaching. It is something that sentient beings require to learn. It is something that all human beings require to learn. Whether or not, you can't use the excuse that you won't practice that because you're not a Buddhist. This is a human need. We need to understand cause and effect relationships. We need to accumulate that knowledge. And understanding a cause and effect relationship, we can apply the technology to make a difference. Every bit of suffering that one sees in the world in this day and age, the suffering that occurs between nations and due to conflict, due to one person taking from another, due to one person attacking another, all of these things would be completely avoided if one understood and meditated upon cause and effect relationship, and if one looked at one's own mind and really understood and saw the seeds within the mind stream and really did everything that they could to pacify that, to apply the antidote, the opposite, understanding that one has the propensity toward to being unkind toward others, and one is experiencing some lack in one's life due to that. One should apply the antidote and not continue in that habitual tendency. And the antidote, of course, boils down to love. What else would it boil down to? So it sounds very simple, and yet we remain here with this challenge of having to go into the real world and use the discipline of taking the time to really observe ourselves, to really look at ourselves and to learn from ourselves, and to see where everything's coming from. And most of all, to learn to apply the antidote. Very important for us as individuals, as a group, for us as a nation, for us as a world. If there is to be any relief from the suffering of the world, it would start there.
Siddhartha